They came here for peace, a quiet life after tragedy. But what began with garden gnomes and a power-hungry neighbor would unravel a web of corruption hiding in plain sight. This is the story of a woman who turned pain into purpose, and how one suburban porch became the front line for justice. Stay with us. What you're about to hear isn't just about laws. It's about what happens when someone finally says, "Enough." I never imagined our search for peace would lead to war. Camilla and I moved to Pine Hollow in early spring, desperate for a fresh start. The accident had changed everything. One moment we were driving home from a weekend trip, the next she was in a hospital bed with pins in her leg and months of pain ahead. The doctors said she was lucky. I called it a miracle she survived it all. Pine Hollow seemed like a perfect place to recover. The neighborhood was quiet, filled with lush gardens and pristine sidewalks. The houses all looked similar: clean lines, muted colors, overly manicured lawns. Too perfect, maybe. But we weren't picky. We needed somewhere to heal. The house came with a little front garden. Among the trimmed hedges stood 4 ceramic gnomes, weathered but charming. The seller told us they'd been there for years. Camilla loved them immediately. They made her smile. And in those early days of recovery, even a small smile was gold. Then came Miranda Keene. The first time we met her, it was raining. Camilla had dressed up for her first day back at work, just a half day, easing in. I watched her from the porch as she moved carefully down the steps, balancing on her crutches with quiet grace. That was when Miranda appeared. She wore a raincoat too stiff to be practical, and held a clipboard like it was a weapon. The HOA president, self-appointed queen of the neighborhood. She didn't say hello. She didn't introduce herself. She pointed at the gnomes. "Those aren't permitted. Lawn ornaments are against the HOA regulations," Camilla answered politely. "They were here when we moved in. I can remove them after work today." But Miranda's eyes narrowed. She wasn't interested in cooperation. "The rules are the rules," she snapped. Then, with stunning speed, she stepped forward and struck one of Camilla's crutches with the clipboard. Camilla fell hard. Her scream sliced through the rain. I ran to her, slipping on the wet pavement. Her face was twisted in pain. I wanted to hit Miranda. I wanted to scream, but I held it in and got my wife to the hospital. The news was bad. The healing leg was refractured. More surgery, more recovery. Camilla's hands trembled as she listened. But it wasn't from fear. It was from fury. That night, back in bed, leg wrapped in ice and pain meds dulling her voice, Camilla opened her laptop. I brought her tea. She didn't drink it. She was typing, eyes locked on the screen. "Miranda Keene, that name rings a bell," she said. It did. Camilla had worked as a lead investigator for the Oregon Attorney General's office. Her specialty was fraud and abuse cases. Before the accident, she had been building a file, one that involved suspicious HOA foreclosures across the state. Pine Hollow was one of the communities under review, and Miranda Keene's name had already appeared in the data. Camilla pulled up her old notes. I watched her transform. The pain didn't disappear, but something bigger took over. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was on a mission. In the following days, she worked from bed. I became her eyes and ears in the field. We started small. I attended HOA meetings. I smiled. I played the part of the clueless newcomer. I recorded everything. We found patterns. Dozens of homeowners fined for absurd violations. A bird feeder, a mailbox color, faded paint. The fines escalated fast, hundreds. Then, thousands of dollars. When residents couldn't pay, the HOA foreclosed. Then the homes were bought up quietly, often by shell companies linked to Brian Keene, Miranda's husband, a real estate investor who always seemed to know exactly when a property would hit the market. One elderly woman, Mrs. Griffin, had lost her home over a cracked driveway. Another, Mr. Yang, was fined $11,000 for leaving holiday lights up 2 days past New Year's. They weren't isolated cases. They were a pattern. The targets elderly, immigrant, and disabled residents. Easy marks. 3 weeks after the attack, Camila requested reinstatement. The AG approved it within hours. She was back on the case. She compiled everything: forged signatures, fake inspections, bribes to board members. We found a notary who had signed off on foreclosures without ever meeting the homeowners. An HOA board member confessed under pressure, giving us access to financial records. Camila built a 300-page report. It was dense, airtight, and damning. And then came the moment. On a Thursday morning, just before dawn, law enforcement swarmed Pine Hollow. No sirens, just unmarked vans and officers with badges. Camila walked among them, slower than before, leaning on a cane, but there was power in every step. She led the team to Miranda's garage, where she held all her HOA files. Camila stepped inside and held up the warrant. Miranda Keene, you are under investigation for fraud, discrimination, illegal foreclosures, and assaulting a public official. Miranda's mouth opened. No words came. Her hands trembled. You can't do this, she whispered. I was just protecting property values. Camila's voice was steady. You were protecting your own profits. Then she added, with a cold smile. Remember the gnomes you hated so much? Each one had a tiny recorder inside. You told on yourself. Miranda, again and again. Miranda was arrested. So was her husband later that day. The story exploded. News vans lined the street for weeks. The state uncovered over $5 million in fraudulent profit linked to the Keenes. 5 other individuals were indicted, including a bank manager who helped launder the money. But Camila didn't stop there. She worked with lawmakers to draft new legislation. Any HOA managing more than 50 homes would now require state auditing. A restitution fund was created. Families who had lost their homes unfairly began receiving settlements. Some even returned to Pine Hollow. Mrs. Griffin moved back in. So did Mr. Yang. They brought cookies and hugs and tears of joy. Camila was promoted to Deputy Director of Public Integrity. Her limp remained, but her spirit was louder than ever. 6 months later, Pine Hollow was different. The HOA was gone. In its place was a voluntary neighborhood circle. No fines, no anonymous citations, just people. Talking, helping, laughing. We sat on our porch, surrounded by new gnomes. Decorative this time. No more wires, just charm. A neighbor placed a small statue at our steps. A woman holding a cane, standing tall with a legal briefcase in her hand. Underneath, it read, "She didn't just stand up, she stood for all of us." And she did. Every step she takes reminds me of it. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it limps, but it always moves forward. And sometimes all it takes to tear down a corrupt empire is a garden gnome and a woman who refuses to stay silent.